I'm such a big advocate for people to go to therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy, because
good for you.
It's one of the first things. It was really the first time in my life that I examined with any kind of rigor the exactly what we're talking about, which is the difference between how we have evolved and evolutionary psychology, as you're talking about it, really, right? Which is really this thread. It's this thread that still, that we still are born and die on. That is, a thread that's carrying us through time, forward through time. It's one of those, arrows with a terminus at one end and an arrow that's pointing in one direction, just going linear in one direction. So this evolutionary psychology is happening underneath it all at these very core molecular biological levels. But meanwhile, all of the fucking noise, all of the noise that we've created for ourselves as we have evolved and come up with, I was watching Supermarket Sweep last night on Netflix, the idea of fucking idiots running around a television studio grabbing, pasta sauce off of a wall to win $50. Like, all of these asinine things that if you gave the deepest thinkers, a million years ago, time to think about how fucking crazy things have gotten now, they would have never, ever been able to come up with it. So there's such an enormous disconnect between what our biology tells us our day should look like in this kind of deep underlying thread versus, getting up and having to worry about whether or not you have enough money to take your car for a fucking oil change. Like, I mean, that delta, and it's getting wider too, Marc, which is why people are getting more and more psychotic, I think. I mean, obviously, I don't know shit about this, but does that make sense to you?
Oh, very much so. I think a lot of our present-day problems are due to the fact that we're stuck in environments that, we weren't meant to be in necessarily from an evolutionary standpoint. You're talking about money, I mean, that if you'd have told a creature like Homo erectus, that there was this thing, money, and they could have what they wanted with it, they'd laugh at you probably.
Yeah.
So,
that's one of the most basic, extraordinarily basic social constructs we have now.
Yes. And so we've had to completely change our way of living, yet we still have all of these things that kept us, if I always wondered, why in the heck do I get so stressed out because somebody said this thing to me, or what did they mean by that,
Right, yep.
and you spend a lot of your life going, how do I react to that kind of stuff? And so when I learned about evolutionary psychology, I began to realize, it didn't necessarily change me, but I began to realize that, we are affected by the way people think of us because we had to live in these small groups where if you didn't get along with the people that you worked with, you found yourself out living alone on your own. And that was undoubtedly certain death. So we all had to get along, and a lot of that we experience today. It's not life and death, but sometimes react to it. If your boss gets mad at you and you might spend a sleepless night thinking, am I going to be fired? Well, a part of that worry has to do with the fact that if that happened in hunter-gatherer society where the group decided you were an asshole, well, they boot you out. So, one of the big stresses on our lives is probably trying not to be an asshole. Sorry for my language, but
no, we encourage freedom of speech here on this show.
Good for
I'm
you.
okay with it. You're the president of your university might not agree with it.
I'll get a call from the department chair tomorrow.
Yeah. You're toast tomorrow, Defant. Is there anything else that staying on the same topic of evolutionary psychology that you find fascinating, that you can kind of take a look at how it would have affected our lives or the lives of something like Homo erectus versus how it affects our lives today? You just made a very good analog, right, in terms of social acceptance. I mean, what are some of the other kind of fascinating things that you find interesting that we can tie back to then?
Let me just kind of entice you a little bit with some of this, because I think we could talk hours about this. I think that we go through life a lot of times behaving instinctually to things, and we're not knowing, and we don't know why we're behaving in a specific way.
Right. And
evolutionary psychology explains a great deal of our behavior. To give you an example, if you've ever wondered why there aren't gangs of old geezers running around beating up people, why do only young men do this? It's because your hormones have kicked in, and you have a desire to impress women and compete with other men. So there's this, and we talked a little bit about this, I think, in the last show, where men tend to be much more competitive than women. We tend to be generally competitive with other men to win the hearts of women. So some of that competition turns out to be physical. So if you've ever wondered why a guy gets a wrong look at a bar and then starts a fight, this all can be taken back to our competition for women. Those slights that men perceive and have been all the time, oh, that's toxic masculinity and that kind of nonsense. It's not. It's
actual masculinity.
Well, I'm not saying that men should go out and fight,
right?
Because if you're bright, you don't have to compete at the physical level,
right?
And probably people that are listening to this show are bright. So you've got a bunch of men now competing on an intellectual basis, and women don't. Look at the women that are very successful in life. They don't choose men that are blue collar. They choose men that are equal or above them in intellectual and professional abilities. I don't mean to badmouth blue collar people. I'm just saying that women tend not to marry down, whereas men are less interested in how much money their wife makes than women are. Opposite way, and men are much interested in beauty. Well, beauty is really a surrogate for health. So when we say a woman is beautiful, it's cross-cultural. We will all agree as to whom the most beautiful women are. And that's kind of the stuff I'm talking about. So if you've ever wondered why you're attracted to beautiful women and why everybody else is, it's because you're being attracted to them because they have healthy genes. Now, I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that if you're not beautiful that you're, a failure genetically. That's not my point. My point is, though, is that this is being overlooked because it goes against some of the some of the opinions of the radical left. And I hate to see science discounted because it doesn't agree with a certain politic.